Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm George Conley with Scratch Golf Tips, and today I wanted to shed some light on long irons. I know that long irons are an important part to a lot of people's game, and it's also a big obstacle in a lot of people's game. If you're not too consistent with your long irons, the 5-iron, 4-iron, even a 3-iron for some golfers, then it's going to make playing long par 4s where, you don't get your drive out there too far. It's going to make those very difficult, and it's going to make par 5s and trying to get on or around the green in 2 much more difficult. So a few months back, I recognized that this was a part of my game that I needed to work on, and I did some filming of a practice session. Now let's talk about what I've been working on to improve my long iron play, and I've seen some great benefit from doing these strategies already. So the number one thing that I've focused on in my practice is my weight transfer and distribution through the golf swing. Now for me, I've always been pretty steep with these irons. I've known that with my 4 and 5 iron, the miss is almost always fat. I chunk the ball, make contact an inch or two behind the ball, and the ball won't go nearly as far. Obviously, it doesn't have an ideal flight. So what I've worked on is still having that weight on my front foot. It's still an iron, but not being nearly as far forward on that left leg. I'm a right-handed golfer, so that's my lead leg, but feeling a lot more neutral. And to go on top of that, I also have tried to feel like when I'm rotating through the ball with my upper body, with my wedge, I feel as though my lead shoulder, my left shoulder, kind of comes down at impact. I want that left shoulder to stay pretty neutral or even come up a little bit through the impact position. So my chest is almost working up a little bit. It's not dissimilar to how I swing my driver. You want to have an upward angle, but I feel like for my own swing, a helpful feel has been try and feel that left shoulder come up right after the ball, right after the low point of the golf swing. That's really helped me not be too steep, and I've really stopped chunking my long irons almost altogether. Another thing that I focused on that correlates with the weight transfer and the way that my upper body is moving through the ball is I've been pretty focused on my divots. I used to take very big divots, with my pitching wedge and my 4-iron, the divot sizes were pretty similar, but I've really tried to shallow out and be much less steep. So one thing that I will always say is super important to consider when you're practicing iron shots on the range is throughout your range session, look down at your divots. You can learn a lot about your swing and how you're moving through the ball just by looking at your divots. If it's really steep and it's moving in a certain direction, almost, the majority of your divots aren't going to be perfectly straight because a lot of golf swings aren't perfectly straight through the ball. So you can learn a lot about how your swing is coming through the ball. If you're chunking it, if you're hitting it a little bit thin, just look at your divots and pay attention. That's something that I looked at. I saw my divots were too big. They were too right to left coming across the ball. So that's something that I paid attention to, and it really allows for good constructive criticism when doing more practice. Now, from looking at my divots, I did see, as I mentioned earlier, that I was coming from right to left. I was coming across the ball and cutting it a little bit, and because I was coming in so steep, my club angle was just really covering the ball, and that's why I was just a little bit too steep through the ball and chunking it. So that was the big miss. So I just worked on shallowing out my golf swing. For me, it's just inside of neutral. It's like a minus 0.2 in terms of the club path angle, and I've been very happy with that, and I've seen some pretty good success with it. I now hit a pretty basic draw, a very tight draw with that club, and that's helped me a lot. And I think for a lot of golfers, if your issue is chunking the ball, turning to a draw or trying to shallow out your swing will be of benefit to you. And on the contrary, if you've been thinning your long irons, if that's generally what the miss is, then maybe trying getting a little bit steeper and coming across the ball a bit more could be a benefit. And now the other two things that I always focus on when trying to dial in any part of my game, whether it's the driver or chips or any part of it, I always like to focus on my rhythm, just keeping tabs on your swing tempo, your swing rhythm, making sure you're staying balanced. Whenever you're working on swing changes, you're trying out new things. Oftentimes people will get a little bit lost in what they're doing. They'll try and swing way too hard. They'll lose their balance. Throughout any type of practice, just always, every couple of swings, just look back and say, all right, am I staying balanced? Am I keeping a repeatable rhythm? That's all very important. And then finally, one thing that I found really helped my setup here was just really exaggerating a feeling of being relaxed over the ball, slumping my shoulders down, keeping decent posture, but slumping my shoulders down, letting my hands rest and fall where they may. I found that just being a little bit more relaxed over the ball releases some of that tension in the arms, which, you know, when I'm trying to hit a 4-iron 220 yards, it's a pretty big shot. It's generally an important shot to hit when I'm on the golf course. So occasionally I get some tension, but by exaggerating a really relaxed feel over the ball, I've found that that has done nothing but help those swings and just help me be a little bit more controlled. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your current long iron game. If you've struggled with them and you're now a little bit better, tell me about the practice that led you to it. And if you have any further questions or comments on anything I mentioned in this video, please leave them in the comment section down below. As always, thank you all very much for watching. Play well and take care.